Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Dr. Amin Sanaia. Amin is a culture builder, people strategist and author who focuses on organisational development and leadership development with a particular focus on diversity, equity and inclusion. And he's the author of a book called CRAVE, and this CRAVE acronym is what we're going to unpack today. But more importantly, Amin's also got a really interesting personal background that we also want to unpack a little bit to understand some of the leadership lessons he learnt through his upbringing and how he migrated to the US. I'm not going to share the story. I want him to share that story. We're going to unpack that during the first part of the episode, and then we're going to get into understand what CRAVE leadership means. So without any further ado, Amin, please say hello to our audience and let's get straight in to that really interesting background of yours and what led you to be with us today.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Mick. I really appreciate all the wonderful things you just mentioned. I'm really happy to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm sure you listen from all over the world. So I want to talk a little bit about my story. So I was born in Dominican Republic. At an early age, we had to leave our country. My father was president of the largest labor union in Dominican Republic, and that wasn't too fond of in the 70s and early 80s. So the government asked us to leave, and we had to, get uprooted, leave everything we had. We had a very nice lifestyle, but then we had to go to New York City. We went from having a very nice home to living in a 700 square foot apartment. That was not the best living conditions. And shortly after us being there, my dad became disabled for life, so he couldn't work. So now it was myself, my brother, my sister. My sister was very young. My brother was the oldest, my late brother. And my mom had to go work at a sweatshop. My mom was a renowned university professor in Dominican Republic. So life got real for us, very real. We had some nights, we had no dinner. It was really rough. My brother and I had to start working as kids just to help out with whatever we can. So it was that part of my life shaped the person that I am today. I'm very driven. I want to do the best that I can to support my family. So those early days, I can vividly remember some of those struggles, and I promised myself that my family, my kids will never go through something like that.
So thank you, Amin, for that great description of your early life. What I want to unpack is your early memories of that. So tell me about moving from Dominican Republic in what you described as a nice, beautiful house and landing in one of the world's largest cities into a 700 square foot apartment. What do you remember about that?
Well, number one, the culture shock. For those of you that live in a house, it's a big difference living in a house than going to live in a very small apartment where you're limited. You don't have a backyard since you live with other people because you're living in the same building. And as kids, you can't run around. You have to not make as much noise. So those are different. The language barrier, that was huge. In Dominican Republic, you speak Spanish. We didn't speak any other language because we didn't have any thoughts or ideas of going to other countries. So it was very quickly we had to adopt and learn a different language. We went to school. I mean, the only way I can communicate was carrying a pocket-sized translator where, you try to communicate that way. And it's very different. I mean, that whole period of time.
So I'm sorry that you went through some of those struggles that you went through, but I'm also very proud of you that you came through the other end, and I'm very proud of your success that you've had. I mean, here you are as a doctoral fellow, you're now a published author, you learnt English, all of these things, and you come out the other end. So amazing that you've come through it, but I am still sorry that you went through such a traumatic time to get there, but we do get stronger through some of those struggles. What I'd love to know, because I pick up here that your parents were, and still to this day, were a huge influence on you. What did you learn about life and leadership from your mother and father?
Oh man, what a great question there, Meg. Yeah, my parents are, for me, very important. They're my two heroes. My mom being a university professor and then having to go from, being a university professor to having to go to another country, not know the language, and then just having to go work in a sweatshop. That speaks volume of a person, their makeup. And, she knew that we were kids and they had to take care of us. So that's from my mom. And that's where I think a lot of the parts of me being so driven is because I saw what she had to do. And it's like, okay, if she can do that, man, I can do better for sure. Now, my father is a little bit different. We got to the United States in New York City and he had a slip and fall accident and he became disabled. Talk about, being a man, and especially I can tell you in our culture, the man is the one that provides. So he went from, providing for the family to not being able to do that. I mean, I don't know, but that's very powerful for him to not give up on life because, you pretty much, his number one job was providing for us and he couldn't. But, he didn't let that get him down. He actually learned how to cook. So he was doing more stuff in the house. So he helped in that sense. And then he was really good with calligraphy. So he also started doing some printing and trying to do certain things from the house to try to help support my mom and her having to work so much as the number one breadwinner. So being able to adapt to that, just looking at that example is like, wow, okay.
That's the two words that are popping into my mind here, necessity and adaptability in both cases. So putting gender bias aside for a moment, and in fact, we probably do need to quickly discuss it. So I'd love to see an end to a situation where men feel like they need to be the primary breadwinner and that these society roles and that women should be the homemaker, et cetera, and, put that aside for a moment. There's an identity challenge there that your father grew up in an era where that was the case for sure, where society and his own expectations would have been that I need to provide for my family. And here he is, slip and fall. His identity's challenged. Am I a man anymore? Am I a man because I can't go out and work? But I wasn't there, but I'm playing back what I'm hearing from you. He was able to swallow that, pivot, reframe and go, okay, but I can contribute in other ways. I might not be able to go out and be the primary breadwinner anymore, but I can cook. The calligraphy, that was really interesting. I can do things that help the family. And then the same with your mum, going from being a university professor through necessity, and I'm going to come to unpacking that a little bit in a moment, to go, okay, we need food on the table here, so I'm going to go out and work in sweatshop conditions because I need to put food on the table. So necessity and adaptability are the two words that pop into my mind there. How does that sit with you?
Now that you're saying it, I didn't realize that at that time, but I used that to grow as a person. So nowadays, I'm the type of human that I'm adaptable. Like I can adapt to any situation. So one of the things that I'm known for is being a change agent. And I think that's where it comes from. It's from watching that and living that experience that things can and will change. And it's up to us to adapt to it or not. So I think that really has shaped a lot of my professional and personal career.
There's two things there, I think. So the first one about change. I can't remember who said this. I'm going to have to find out where this quote comes from. But in today's world, it's now changing faster than it ever has in history. But the scary thing is it's now changing slower than it ever will in the future, right? So change is just ever increasing. I feel like at some point it's got a plateau, but at the moment it's not. It's changing all the time. And if we're not adaptable and we're not changing with it, we're going backwards. So that's wonderful from your perspective there, Amin. And then the second thing I'm now thinking with your parents is the difference between a victim mindset and a creator mindset. So a victim mindset, if I think in both your parents' situation, a victim mindset would have been, oh, none of this is my fault, woe is me, etc., and just blame the world for your problems and sit back and do nothing. And a creator mindset would go, okay, these things have happened, they're out of my control, but what can I do? What can I do with what I have from where I am so I can take a step forward. And what I'm seeing with both of your parents is a creator mindset that they did what they could with what they had with where they were. How does that sit with you?
It sits very well. Like I said, I couldn't say it enough. I'm so proud of my parents to be able to overcome those situations. And what you mentioned, as you were saying it, I can remember several speeches that John Maxwell had given in that, people can have the victim mindset or they can have a victor mindset. I'm going to overcome, whatever challenges come my way, I have to adapt and, look at it in a positive manner. And how do I learn and use it for greatness? So it sits very well with me. Just another example of them, giving me life lessons that I've used over and over again.
All right. Thanks, Amin. The one that I've been dancing around I want to address now, I want to talk about society and culture here at this point. And your mum being a university professor in Dominican Republic and landing in the US and having to go into a sweatshop. I want to share something with you from an Australian point of view. And Australians listening, they're all going to know at least one, maybe 20 people that are like this. We in Australia, we have fully trained doctors from Sri Lanka, from India, from other countries that migrate to Australia and end up driving taxis. And honestly, I can't tell whether this is structural, whether it is, I can't avoid the word racist. I cannot tell what the issue is. But how do we end up in a situation where there's a university professor who lands in New York City and ends up working in a sweatshop?
I can tell you because number one should be or was the need at that time. I know that they didn't have good guidance and how do they adapt or bring their skill set and allow to further those studies in the United States. And she can continue being a university professor. For sure, they didn't have the guidance to be able to do that. And then when you end up in a situation where the need is so great, you just do whatever. I think that's what happened in that situation.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see the necessity there. And you are so proud of your mum. I don't know her. I'm proud of her. I can see the necessity. I was just deeply curious about whether there was a structural issue there associated with her qualifications weren't recognized. But yeah, okay. All right, very cool.
They never got the opportunity to venture and kind of get that said because everything happened so fast.
All right, understood. Brilliant. So we're now getting a flavour for the upbringing of Amin and some of those life lessons, including from your parents, that go on to create your values, which I believe are very important to you. I want to wind the clock forward quite rapidly now. What leads you into the big world of leadership, Amin?
At an early age, or when I say early, my teenage years, because of what I went through and with my parents and coming to this country and having to grow up very quickly, having to go to work and have responsibilities at a very young age as a kid, I think I got exposed to certain things that really called my attention. So the other thing is that we were also Catholic based. So we attended Mass every Sunday, but not only that, we're participants of the church. And one of the things that I just had a yearning for was, wow, the church that we're attending didn't have a youth group. And, talking to a couple of my friends, well, why don't we create a youth group? And the pastor was like, yeah, create a youth group. So we did. We created a youth group from like 4 or 5 kids. In 2 years, we had just about every single child from 13 through 19 in the youth group. We had over 200 kids. Our youth group was very involved. I was one of the leaders in the youth group. And one of the things that we created, I was very proud of, was the volunteer aspect. So we used to go on Saturdays for 3 to 4 hours and go volunteer at a retirement community and just go spend time with this great generation of people that were retired at that time and just sitting down and listening to their stories. So I got to learn a lot from that. And that's how I got really exposed to leadership. And also that became what I wanted to do. How do I impact people's lives in a positive manner every day from that experience? And I did that for several years. And then that's how I got introduced to healthcare and healthcare administration and started leading teams. But that's the foundation of it.
Yeah, brilliant, Amin. So two things I'm picking up there. It happened very early for you. And the second is that it was very purpose-driven. And it was purpose-driven around what you and I would call servant leadership, about helping others, serving others. Yeah, very good. Now, you did mention off-air, you and I have had a couple of chats together, a number of different authors that have also influenced you and really helped you to develop your own mindset and philosophy around leadership. So tell us more about who have been some of those influences in your life around leadership.
So yes, early on, first book I read was from Jim Collins, and that really got me thinking about leadership. And one of the things that I learned from my parents, and I remember my dad used to always, really say this to me: whatever you do, whether you're going to be picking up trash, cleaning a bathroom, or being the president of the country, you're going to be the best at whatever you're going to do. So that was ingrained in me from at an early age. And, once that time came that I'm going to get into leadership, you know what? I remember my dad, and his conversations with me that you're going to be great at it. So what do I have to do? Unfortunately, the way leadership typically works in organization is not the best. I decided to take a personal challenge and really educate myself, not only through schooling, but also through people that are role models that at that time I saw as the people that I can learn from. So Jim Collins at first, then later on, I got introduced to John Maxwell, which I loved. I loved his books. I love his speeches. It led me to become a John Maxwell certified trainer, coach, speaker, and I've done a lot with that. Also, in that same time, I ran into Malcolm Gladwell, and his thought-provoking books are just amazing. So I love that piece as well, being a maverick, doing things different. I like that stuff. So then got introduced to Adam Grant. So I read a lot of his stuff, and Brene Brown, read several of her books. So those are the, really big influencers for me and my career, and specifically in leadership.
So you can see that influence building up in you there, for sure. So what inspired you then to put pen to paper, so to become an author?
I've always had this intrigue with writing and putting my thoughts on paper. I never saw how it would come to fruition. So it was sort of a dream or goal to achieve. And then as I was furthering my studies, when I started my doctoral program, was okay, so I'm going to use a lot of the things that I decided to select a doctoral program that was going to really allow me to do what I do best. So I didn't just say, okay, I'm just going to go to this doctoral program and just get a degree. No. I did a lot of research. I actually started one before I got to the one I graduated from, but I didn't like it. It didn't have what I wanted. So I stopped and I started researching more. And then I found the one that I wanted because it just allowed me to, number one, do the research in the area that I love. Two, it was flexible enough that it's going to allow me to write in the things that I love. And I used a lot of that. And once I saw that I can really put a lot of my thoughts on paper, that's when I was like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to use my life experiences leading hundreds of teams and really go at it. And that's how it started. And that's where the framework got built and just released it.
All right, brilliant. So your framework is an acronym, and it's an acronym that builds up around your values and beliefs around leadership. So tell us what CRAVE means to you.
So CRAVE is an acronym, as you mentioned, which stands for communication, respect, authenticity, vulnerability, and empathy. Now, those are values that are very important, very near and dear to my heart as a person, being a human being, but also in my professional career, I found that those values are that those successful leaders have. Those are very common in successful leaders and successful teams. Number one, communication. You have to be able to communicate effectively in order to be a great leader. Respect. As human beings, we have to have that. We earned that. And especially nowadays, we underwent through this pandemic and the great resignation. What are people looking for? Some purpose. They want to be respected at work. They want to have a purpose to what they do. So those are important. Authenticity. You want to be able to be in a place that you can be you, that people allow you to be you. You're not a robot. You're not. So one of the things that I learned in life, and I speak to this a lot with people as much as I can, is that this old saying of you're one person at work work, you're another person at home. And that's not true. You are who you are. Okay. Now, when you go to work, you're probably a little bit more measured because you have to be because of rules and policies and things of that nature. But you are who you are. And when organizations hire you, when I hire people, I'm hiring the person. I'm not hiring a piece of paper. A piece of paper is going to take whatever words you put on there. It doesn't matter, but you're hiring that person. So you're hiring that person with all their flaws and all their gifts. So authenticity is so important, so valuable to what you do. Vulnerability. There's nothing wrong as a leader in being vulnerable. Now, you'll speak to some leaders that are more autocratic and they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to be seen as vulnerable because they think it's some kind of taboo. Oh, no. Well, guess what? If your people see you as this godlike creature that they can't reach, you're not a leader. They're not going to follow you. They want to follow that person that can resonate with them. So it's okay to be vulnerable. Make fun of yourself in front of your teams. They will embrace that. So vulnerability is very key. And then finally, empathy. I mean, just look at our world. We don't have that. We don't have that. We need that.
Not enough, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. We have so many single parents, right, that go to work. And these single parents, guess what? If the kids wake up and they're giving you trouble or they're not feeling well, they're probably not going to make it to work on time if they make it at all. You need to be empathetic to those situations, because there is not a perfect human being. So, I mean, as leaders, like I said, I mean, these values are the most important that a leader can have in order to create dynamic, successful teams.
All right. Wonderful, Amin. So we have communication, respect, authenticity, vulnerability, and empathy. I want to spend a little bit of time here unpacking each one. Just a brief one. I want to give one takeaway for the leaders out there in each one. So with communication, what I want to start with, what are the common mistakes or misperceptions that leaders have about communication in your perspective?
That communication is one way. I can tell you that.
I was so hoping you would say that. Well done. Okay, tell me more.
So communication is funny, but if you want to be a great communicator, you have to be a great listener. You cannot, when you go into a meeting or you're with your teams and the people that you lead, if you are doing the majority of the talking, you're not a leader. A leader needs to be able to listen. You have to let the people speak. You listen, absorb the information, and then you speak. Also, as a leader, if you're in a meeting, you should not be the first one speaking. You should be the last one speaking. Allow everyone else to say their piece before you say yours.
All right, brilliant. So I'm going to summarize that a little bit. Communication, it's not all about one way. It's actually mostly about listening. So learn to be the last to speak and remember that you are truly listening. Listening is not the same as waiting for your turn to talk, okay? So you're deeply listening. I'll go further. Listen with an open mind, with an open heart, with an open will. Don't just listen for things that are congruent with a preconceived idea that you had before the meeting. You've got to truly listen. Listen objectively. Listen without judgment. All right, brilliant. That's a great one for communication. Tell me what respect means. How does a leader show respect to their team?
So respect for me, it goes further than just, respecting that person. Respect goes into having that really the courage to accept that diversity that comes with people. And when I talk about that, I don't just talk about the color of the skin. I'm talking about diversity of thought. So Mick, you and I have different backgrounds, different upbringings. We probably can get to the same results if we are given a task to do, but we'll go about it different ways because of my background training, because your background training, because of your upbringing. So diversity of thought, it is so key when you're a leader that you allow, that you show that respect to those people that you're given the opportunity to lead. You allow them to be themselves. And it touches a little bit on the authenticity side, but it allow them to be themselves in a way where you respect their diversity of thought, their thought processes, because we're humans, we're unique unto ourselves. So we go about things in a different manner. So a single mom or father, or say single parent that had to really have a rough upbringing, they go about ways differently than someone that comes from a stable two-parent home that didn't have to struggle growing up. Okay. So they have different perspectives, and we have to, respect that diversity. So that is so important as a leader. And when I talked about respect, a lot of my conversations is about that.
I love this, Amin. So what do people want in the workplace? They want to be seen, they want to be heard, and you're showing that, and you're showing a respect of seeing them, of hearing them, and seeing them for who they really are, and seeing them for the rich diversity that they bring to the table, the diversity of their background and their experiences. And the key points here is that different is not wrong. You pointed out that you and I could be given the same problem. Like if you and I we worked for the same company, or we were faced with the same challenge, we could solve a problem in a different way and still get to a equally good answer. I'm going to go a step further. I mean, if you and I were working together and we deeply respected each other and we held space for each other and we listened deeply to each other and our differences and our backgrounds and experiences, we could co-create something together that was even better than either one of us could do by ourselves. How does that sit with you?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's very powerful. When you were just saying that, so I have a presentation that I do a lot, especially when I'm introducing CRAVE to organizations or to leaders. So in that respect part, I show a video that talks about not putting people in boxes. So when you try to lump in everyone together, you're really disrespecting them. So don't do that. Don't do that. So, don't, just because you and I have accents, don't lump us into one group. Oh, those are the people that have accents. No, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the things. So respect is also valuing the inclusion.
You know what? Accents are just perspective anyway. I tell this to my wife all the time. She always pokes fun at me at my Australian accent, which, by the way, for an Australian, my Australian accent is actually not very thick. There's a lot of Australians that have got a lot thicker accents than I do. But I tell her that I don't have an accent, as the 7 billion other people in the world have an accent, because accents are relative. Anyway, we digress. Let's move on to authenticity. What tip can you give to people? Because you kind of hit on this before when you went through it, but I'm going to replay it a little bit again now. There are leaders out there that think that they're playing a role. They're showing up to work and going, okay, the role of leader today is being played by Dr. Amin Sanaia. And he's going, like they're acting. What tip can you give to people that feel like they're putting on a show every day to go, you know what, you don't have to do that. Just drop it. We just want to see the real you.
Yeah. So as a leader, what was really fun for me being a leader is I get to be myself. So I don't have to be an actor in the movie. I get to play Amin as the leading actor in the movie. And because I can do that, it resonates with people. So as a leader, you have to be relatable. You have to be. And, how do you do that? Being yourself. One of the things that I learned in my early career was that from a mentor. So I was asked, Amin, do you know who you are? And I was like, wow, hold on a second. Yeah, I'm Amin Sanaia from whatever. And then he was like, well, that's great. That's your background. But do you know who you are? And that was deep. That was really deep. So that got me thinking a lot in that, like, okay, so yeah, you have to get comfortable within your own skin. So being authentic is that. Being allowed to be yourself, okay? With your quirks, what makes you go. Because if you want to get the most out of a person is by you allowing them to be authentic. You're not going to get a lot from people if they feel they're on pins and needles or that they have to be a certain way in order to be in a workplace. So authenticity is that for me.
There's 3 really powerful things here. The first one is showing up as your authentic self. Doing the opposite is exhausting. It's exhausting. If you're pretending to be someone else every day, it gets very exhausting very quickly. So when you can relax and just be yourself, everything just comes a little easier. The second one that I'm picking up here, that I think is really, really, really powerful, this thing that you say about, do you really know who you are? That's about your values and beliefs, right? And I'm going to unpack why I believe that's really critical here as a leader. When you've connected to who you are as a human being and what your values and beliefs are, and then you're able to show up as a leader that authentically is portraying those values and beliefs, you know what happens with your team? They then don't have to second guess all the time. Is the boss in a good mood today? What's the boss going to think about this? What's the boss going to think about that? I don't even particularly like the word boss, by the way. But if you're true to your values and beliefs, then your team can go, So they already feel like they know you. They go, oh, the boss is not going to be happy with this. They're not going to be happy with this. This goes against their values and beliefs. Or they're going to be happy with this because this is congruent with their values and beliefs. So it stops that second guessing all the time, and it just makes everything come a little bit easier. And then the third thing is that when you do that, it then gives everyone else the license to be able to do it, right? So then when they start showing up as their authentic self, like you said, they don't have those little bits where they have to stop and think, oh, what's expected of me here? They can just relax and just be themselves, right? And then you're going to get the best result out of them because they're not always second guessing themselves, yeah?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I do tell people when I hire them is what I want from you is to bring the whole of you. Don't feel like you have to bring parts. Bring all of it. We'll embrace you, all of it. Bring it.
And this is when we can get to, a speak-up culture, psychological safety, radical candor, if we use Kim Scott's term, because people do feel that they've got that environment where the benefit of speaking up is greater than any fear of doing so because you're there to embrace them for who they are. Yeah, brilliant. All right, so let's go on to vulnerability. This one does scare the hell out of a lot of leaders. Tell us, Amin, what tip can you give? There's going to be leaders listening to this going, oh, no, I could never do this. What tip could you give to a leader out there that's scared of vulnerability? How do they take that first step into vulnerability?
So yes, I mentioned earlier in the interview that it is okay for a leader to be vulnerable, and it's not a weakness, by the way. It actually is a very big piece of being human when you're vulnerable. Because how would you like if you go to an organization and your boss is, well, I don't like the word boss either. I don't even know why I used it. The leader, the person you report to, is someone that is goofy and they're always making fun of themselves. And then makes you, like, oh, okay, well, this is good. It's a good working environment. That is very different than if you go to your workplace and your leader is one that, whoa, everything has to be perfect. And God forbid something goes wrong, they're going to fly off the handle. And they're seeing in this godlike figure that you can't reach, you can't touch. That's not being a leader. A leader is a person that when they make a mistake, they go and tell their teams, I made a mistake. Okay. We're going to learn from my mistake now. Guess what? Now everyone is going to look at you like, oh, okay. So it is okay to make mistakes. Of course it is. What workplace doesn't have people that make mistakes? That doesn't exist. So if you make it okay to, for a person to make a mistake and they're not going to lose their jobs immediately or get reprimanded in front of everyone and making them look like a fool, now you have a very passionate, purpose-driven employee that is going to do the best job they can for you. So it's that being vulnerable. It's okay, man. If you don't know how to be vulnerable, go to your next meeting, make fun of yourself. Who doesn't, do something, that's really comical at times? Make fun of yourself. Tell that story. You'll see the difference in your teams when you do that. Next time you make a mistake, own it and tell your teams. You'll see the difference in your teams when that happens.
I love this. I mean, it's all about being human, and humans make mistakes, and humans can be goofy at times. So the more you're human, the more other people can be human. And the key one there, I think, is the mistakes. Mistakes and bad news do not age well. So if you really want to create a team where everyone is scared to share with you that they made a mistake, then don't show any vulnerability. But if you want people to come to you and say, oh, once again, I'm going to use that word that we neither of you or I like, but hey, boss, I stuffed up today. Need a little bit of help here to dig myself out of a hole. And we all know that the sooner you know about a mistake, the sooner you can fix it. If you want an environment where people can stick up their hand and say, I need help, or B, I made a mistake, then you better role model that behavior, right? You better be able to say, hey, I stuffed up today and this is what I learned from it. Very good. Now, my favorite story about vulnerability comes from one of your mentors, Amin. So I'm going to share it with with you now. And it comes from John C. Maxwell. And he talks about being on a stage in front of some very high-powered CEOs. And he's talking about vulnerability. And clearly this one member in the audience was not sold at all and challenged him and said, "Oh, I could never admit mistakes. It's a sign of weakness. I could never, ever admit my shortcomings." And John just turned to him and said, "But that's because you think they don't already know." Now, that was a powerful statement. Now, so here's one takeaway for the leaders in the audience. Showing the vulnerability also builds trust, because if you're not particularly strong at a certain aspect in your workplace, there's a good chance, because people are pretty darn perceptive, people probably already know. So when you stand up in front of them and say, "Hey team, you know what? I'm not particularly good at topic XYZ," they're going to go, oh, that's cool. The boss knows. It builds trust. So not only does vulnerability create the environment that I'm in that's talking about, where people then can safely hold up their hand and say, "I made a mistake today," it also builds trust because they can see that you are trustworthy because you are sharing with them your weaknesses. How does that sit with you, Amin?
Very well. I mean, just those words when you said that, when Maxwell went back and told them, that's because you think they don't know. They absolutely know, man. As a leader, you got all eyes on you. So as a leader, you want people to model what you do. So guess what? People only do about half of what you do right, but everything you do wrong. Don't ever forget that as a leader.
All right, we better close this out now with empathy. So tell us, let's go a different angle here. Where can empathy go wrong?
Let me answer it this way. Let me just say, this first. So when I talk about empathy, I have a little twist on it. So is that empathy, well, yes, you want to be able to walk in your employee's shoes, but also is what I talk about is being assertive with empathy. And what that means is that you want to create an environment where people can disagree with each other without making it personal. So one of the things that we have, especially in our society now, oh my Lord, is the polarization where you can't even have a disagreement or it becomes personal. How do we grow as human beings if we're not able to challenge each other? You can't grow as a human being if everybody in the room thinks the same. There's no growth. You want to have people that can challenge you. You know why? Because that makes you think. They're like, okay, well, now I have to think of it a different way. And you don't have to always accept everything everyone tells you, but you can listen and then give feedback constructively. And that's when I talk about empathy, is that we have the empathy, but we're assertive. Okay. We allow creating an environment where people can have their say, and it's okay. It's not personal. And that is so hard to create now, especially nowadays in organizations. But when you do that, you're going to thrive as a team because you're going to be able to check each other.
Really powerful, Amin, and I'm going to unpack a little bit there. So the polarization, that's exactly where we are on so many topics today. You either agree with me or you're against me. No, that's not how the world works. This is about listening without judgment. Okay, I might not agree with you, but I hear you. I see you. I hear you. I can see where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree, but I can see where you're coming from. So there's emotional empathy. There's cognitive empathy. So cognitive empathy, okay, yeah, I can see where you got that perspective. It's not, I don't share that perspective, but I can see how you got that perspective. I can feel what you're feeling. I don't feel it myself, but I can see how you feel what you're feeling. So yeah, let's get rid of this polarization. That's a really big step in the right direction for sure. And the other one I'm picking up on here, but I want to test it with you. It's not about all care, no accountability, right? So being an empathetic leader doesn't mean that you sit there and you empathize with your team, they're going through a tough time, et cetera, and you become this loving, caring human being that is their counselor, their pastor, their everything else, and there's no accountability for the performance of their work. It's about empathizing and working together towards performance. How does that sit with you?
It says very well with me, because if people that know me or people that have worked with me, they understand I'm very caring. I'm all about people. One of my models is loving people, loving self. But that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna hold people accountable. It means that I'm gonna do it in a respectful manner, okay? And I'm gonna still care for you. But there's also responsibility that I have to my duties and to your duties. So you're gonna be held responsible. I'm not gonna scream, yell, curse you, or any of that stuff. I'm gonna going to do it in a caring manner, but I'm still going to hold you accountable because that's part of the deal.
Yeah, well done, Amin. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. So we've been through CRAVE now, and we've given leaders out there at least one takeaway for each. So communication, respect, authenticity, vulnerability, and empathy. And this is Amin's amazing framework and model and his book around leadership. And thank you so much for sharing it with us today, Amin. It's been absolutely wonderful. I'd like to take us to our rapid round now, which is the same 4 questions that we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing that you know now, Dr. Amin Sanaia, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
Wow. I would say understanding the value of people.
All right, very good. What is your favorite book? You've got 83 books from John C. Maxwell to pick from, or you can pick someone else.
No. I would say Outliers is probably the one that's really, really, really powerful for me.
All right, brilliant. What's your favorite quote?
Something that that's been very important to me is that loving people, loving self. I learned that through just a lot of personal situations, especially when I was smaller, but also when my late brother passed away. It just hit me home and something that I can carry for the rest of my life. I'm going to say it as many times as I can. People, really, truly, you need to love yourself and love others.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And finally, I'm sure people are going to be curious about CRAVE. They're going to be curious about you. How do people find you if they'd like to know more?
Sure, on my website. So www.draminsanaia.com, draminsanaia.com. I have a lot of information on there. And then if you have any questions, just book a call and we can speak.
Brilliant. And we'll put the link in the show notes so that you can find it very easily. Thank you, Amin. It's been a wonderful conversation today. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I know the audience will as well. Thank you for your time and best of luck for the future.
Absolutely. You're welcome. But I cannot thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you and with your great people that listen to your show.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.